A Tennessee judge was set to hear 2 days' worth of hearings in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. However, those hearings were moved to next month.
Oh boy, okay, get ready for this. So this is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I think everyone knows that by now. He also goes by the Maryland Man. Well, I don't think people realize his human smuggling charges might get dropped.
Now, a federal judge has scheduled a hearing for next week to weigh Kilmar Abrego Garcia's claim that the federal charges against him were vindictive.
That's right. Now Kilmar Abrego Garcia and his lawyers are arguing this is all politically motivated. They're just trying to use Kilmar as an example because he was wrongfully deported. Thus, the charges should be dropped. But there's a very big problem with this argument, because back in 2022, the Tennessee Highway Patrol pulled over Kilmar Abrego Garcia and already suspected human smuggling charges, but had to let him go. And that was back in 2022. Nobody knew who Kilmar was back then. So we have a lot to cover. In fact, we've been covering Kilmar since day one, and man, this story has been quite a roller coaster. Now, before we start the video, make sure you guys please like the video. It's the #1 way you guys are helping this channel, and it also helps others see the videos as well. It's a massive help, and I think people want to see what's going on with this Kilmar story.
Judge Polizini's held today's virtual hearing after the government filed a notice last Friday of its intention to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia to Liberia, a country in West Africa where the official language is English.
Okay, so let's start with this. Where is Kilmar Abrego Garcia going to be deported? Because at one point he was going to be deported to Uganda, then it was Eswatini, now we're talking about Libya. What is going on with that? Well, first off, the Trump administration, they are running out of options, because if you're unaware, these are all of the countries where Kilmar Abrego Garcia does not feel safe, and the majority of the countries on this list are in South America, so that only really opens up one other option, somewhere in Africa. Now, we heard about Uganda, apparently that's not happening. We heard about Eswatini, apparently that's not happening as well. However, the African country of Liberia, that seems to be the next option of where the Trump administration wants to deport Kilmar Abrego Garcia. But there are some complications.
ICE has not yet interviewed Abrego on whether he fears being sent to Liberia. That will happen tomorrow. The injunction Judge Zines has in place prevents the government from deporting Abrego without 72-hour written notice. Now, in today's hearing, Abrego's attorney said if the injunction is lifted, he would appeal.
Okay, so here's the thing. As of right now, there's been no lift of the injunction, so Kilmar cannot be deported as of right now. Now, #2, what we are learning in the deportation process is that the United States does have an obligation to make sure if we're going to deport you, your deportation will not cost you your life. So basically, if you are a Christian and you came into our country illegally, the United States actually does have a law or a moral clause to make sure we don't just re-deport you to like North Korea. But the Trump administration has called out the Kilmar team and said, look, you guys are just listing every single country, and Kilmar is afraid to be deported to every single country. And although Kilmar does have the right to say, I'm afraid to be deported here, the Trump administration in the email even says that claim of fear is hard to take seriously, especially given that you have claimed through your attorneys that you fear persecution or torture in at least 22 different countries. And again, Kilmar has the right to say, I fear torture or I'm afraid of these countries, but it's 22 different countries. And I've already pointed out in previous videos, some of these countries are relatively safe. Some people go on vacations to these countries, which is why the Trump administration's like, hold on, that's why we're just going to send you to an African country. What do you fear there?
Now, lawyers for the man from El Salvador charged with human smuggling in Tennessee are now asking a federal judge here in Nashville to dismiss the criminal case against him.
Okay, so now that we're caught up with the deportation stuff, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is currently in Tennessee. And like you just heard, the Kilmar team is trying to have his human trafficking charges dropped.
The judge will hear arguments over whether the Trump administration unlawfully prosecuted Abrego Garcia. After his mistaken deportation, he was detained on human smuggling charges out of Tennessee. Now his attorneys argue the U.S. government unfairly prosecuted him. Prosecutors say the U.S. attorney in Tennessee alone made the right decision to pursue the case.
Now, real quick, if you haven't already, make sure to please subscribe to my channel so I can keep you up to date with this story and others like it. And if you see the QR code, that's because the majority of you watch this on TV. Use your cell phone, scan the QR code so you can subscribe to my channel to make it a little more easier. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I think this is the final attempt from the Kilmar team to try and get a win for Kilmar. Now, one thing I do want to point out is it looks like the Kilmar team is focusing on the technicalities of how the court system works, not so much arguing what we saw in the video of Kilmar back in 2022 by the Tennessee Highway Patrol.
Lawyers for this man right here, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, argued in a new filing yesterday that the U.S. government did not provide the necessary discovery or allow key witness testimony for an upcoming hearing.
Now, I'm gonna try and be as fair as possible so you guys have both perspectives. To the Kilmar team, the Trump administration is talking in absolutes. They're not using the words allegedly, they're just straight up calling Kilmar Abrego Garcia an MS-13 member, they're calling Kilmar a human smuggler, and so when you start to talk like that, the Kilmar team is arguing, well, this is going to sway the case in court, he's not getting a fair trial, and he should have a fair trial. That's the argument from the Kilmar team. The argument from the Trump administration is, did you watch the video? Because back in 2022, when the Tennessee Highway Patrol, on their body cam footage, when they pulled over Kilmar, they kept saying on the body cam footage, we think this guy is a human smuggler, and then eventually they had to let him go. So this is why the Trump administration keeps talking in these absolutes, and they keep referring to Kilmar as all of these different things. And again, from the Kilmar team, they're saying, whoa, that's not fair because on paper, he technically doesn't have any criminal charges. Thus, what you're doing is not legal and you're ruining this entire case.
Now, his lawyers say that since the judge did, quote, find realistic likelihood of vindictiveness, the government does bear the burden of evidence to prove otherwise. It's not clear exactly when the federal judge will be ruling on this motion to dismiss those charges.
Now, I've actually said this before, that the Trump administration might get into some trouble the way that they're talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. More so in the fact of these African countries are not going to like, if you keep calling Kilmar Abrego Garcia a gang member, why are they going to want him in their countries? And now it looks like it's actually being used against the Trump administration as far as possibly dropping these charges. We have to remember, although you can watch this video and come to the conclusion that Kilmar might be a human smuggler, you could look at his knuckles, the tattoos, the gang affiliation, you could come to the conclusion that he might be a gang member. Kilmar technically doesn't have a criminal history. However, to the Trump administration, you can clearly see the crimes happening on camera. But because we have this technicality and the legality aspect of things, Kilmar not having a criminal history, this is what the Kilmar team is arguing. The Trump administration keeps referring to Kilmar as a human smuggler. The Trump administration's just going after Kilmar for political reasons, to use him as an example. I'm just trying to show you guys this is how the Kilmar team is able to navigate the judicial system. They are really holding on to the fact that Kilmar has no criminal history. Thus, when you accuse Kilmar of a crime, especially from the President of the United States, this case needs to be dropped. This is all political, and that's what the Kilmar team is arguing. So again, I'm just the messenger. Don't get mad at me.
Well, Abrego Garcia turned out to be a very bad poster child for this immigration crisis. And in fact, now the administration is showing exactly the position he's put himself in. So he was given an opportunity to take a plea deal based upon the criminal allegations that came about. But barring that, he's still deportable. So in order to accommodate what the administration says are some issues with other countries that he couldn't go to for fear of persecution.
Okay, this is where things get a little confusing, but I'm gonna do my best to make it as simple as possible. So, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he was offered a plea deal. The plea deal is very simple. All you have to do is say you are guilty of human smuggling, and if you do that, we will just send you to Costa Rica. That seems like a fair plea deal. You're in Costa Rica, you're not too far away from your family, that seems like a safe place. However, the Kilmar team will not take the plea deal. The issue for the Kilmar team is if Kilmar Abrego Garcia says he's guilty, he now has federal charges, and this will make it basically impossible for the Kilmar team to keep him in the United States. Remember, the job of Kilmar's team is to do whatever it takes, any avenue of approach, whatever it takes to keep Kilmar in the United States, that's what they're going to do. And they cannot possibly do that if Kilmar is federally charged. Now, where it gets even more confusing is, even if Kilmar miraculously wins this case and the charges are dropped, well, he can still technically be deported if he is an illegal immigrant. However, the Kilmar team knows it's a lot worse to have federal charges and be deported instead of just being deported. So to the Kilmar team, again, it's their jobs to do whatever it takes to have the most favorable position and outcome for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They are well aware that basically no matter what, Kilmar will probably be deported, but at the very least, maybe a miracle can happen. Maybe this entire case will be dropped and the Kilmar team will argue, you see, this was all politically charged, thus we might have a new argument where maybe we can re-look into the asylum process, maybe we can keep Kilmar in the country, maybe we can get this green card going. Again, I'm just trying to show you guys the Kilmar team is doing whatever it takes, looking at every single avenue of approach to make sure that Kilmar does not have federal charges. That ruins the entire case.
Now, his lawyers say that since the judge did, quote, find realistic likelihood of vindictiveness, the government does bear the burden of evidence to prove otherwise.
So, like you heard, the judge has found some possibility of reasonable evidence that there might be some politically motivated charges here. Again, I do not want you guys to be totally shocked or surprised if all of a sudden these charges get dropped, because we've seen a lot of different turns here. I mean, Kilmar was deported to El Salvador and he came back. Now, we're going to segue to Stephen Miller. And what does Stephen Miller have to do with Kilmar Abrego Garcia? Well, if there was ever one critic of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and critic is being nice here, Stephen Miller has to be the #1 critic to this entire situation. And I want to show you guys, Stephen Miller has been getting a lot of hate for what he's been saying, how he's been acting, so I figured I'd throw this clip in there to show you this is what Stephen Miller has been going through recently, and a lot of it also has to do with what he's been saying about illegal immigrants, deportations, to include Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
I'm friends with your wife. I'm friends with you. You know, your 3 kids are, precious to me. And you have had to deal with severe threats against your life. How do you react to that poll?
So I just want to show you, it's not only Kilmar Abrego Garcia getting all of this hate. On the flip side, the Trump administration, individual members like Stephen Miller, man, they're getting a lot of hate as well.
The Democrat Party has become dangerously, violently radicalized. And you're right, Sean. I get death threats every day. My wife gets death threats every day. We've obviously had to deal with pretty extensive doxing campaigns. But the truth is, Sean, that people across the country, across the government, across law enforcement, who are fighting for safety, security, prosperity, are dealing with radical left communist threats and attacks all day long.
And Kilmar Abrego Garcia was specifically cited as an example from the Trump administration that, look, if Kilmar Abrego Garcia gets this treatment and every other illegal immigrant also gets this treatment, nobody will ever be deported. Again, I'm just trying to give you guys the full story here.
And President Trump, of course, came within centimeters of being assassinated.
1 millimeter.
During the middle of his rally on live television by a wicked, evil assassin, and then only weeks later, a second assassin. If not for a Secret Service agent spotting the barrel of that gun, would have taken President Trump's life.
It is pretty crazy that happened, and it's almost as like we forgot about it. That is wild. That actually happened where the president almost lost his life. I mean, sometimes we just forget these things happen, but yeah.
Saved by the hand of God himself.
Yep.
We are dealing with a party that is so extreme that considers its opponents to be its mortal enemies, that dehumanizes its opposition, that justifies violent attacks against federal law enforcement, assaults against ICE and Border Patrol, that sides over and over again with criminal aliens, MS-13 gangbangers. Look at how they venerated and worshipped and praised the MS-13 child smuggler that they.
See, so this right here is exactly what the Kilmar team is arguing. And again, I am not standing up for Kilmar. I just want to make sure you understand. How do they even have any argument? What are they saying? Because we can see it on camera. The Kilmar team looks at interviews like this and they're like, hey, he is talking in absolutes. He's not using the words allegedly. He's just simply saying Kilmar is a smuggler. Thus, not a fair trial. This is politically motivated. Again, I'm just trying to show you guys. This interview happened 24 hours ago, by the way.
They dubbed the Maryland dad somebody who beat his wife and smuggled children and was a member of a terrorist organization, and they held him up as their hero. This is a dangerous party. This is a dangerous movement. And what you're seeing in New York City with Mamdani, that is the future. A party that believes in no bail, a party that believes in no jail, a party that believes in no borders. But here's one group they do want to put in jail. They're political enemies.
And so to the Trump administration, this is a very big deal. I don't think the Trump administration would deny this is also a little political as far as the Kilmar deporting him and going through this trial, because to the Trump administration, this would be justice for them. This is proving the point that, look, if you are an illegal immigrant, you are afforded due process, but the fact that Kilmar has so much evidence used against him, and there are little caveats in the court system that can protect someone, I think the Trump administration would say that, yeah, this is a little symbolic for us as well. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the update. As of right now, it turns out Kilmar cannot be deported, even though he technically could be deported, but there's a judicial order that has halted that. And as of right now, it looks like Liberia may be the new location of where Kilmar gets sent. But again, this is quite a roller coaster, a lot of different turns. I have no idea what's going to happen. At this point, nothing shocks me. So make sure to please subscribe, leave your comments down below how you feel about all of this. And again, I always advocate for peace. Make sure we are please praying for peace, especially in times like this. And I hope I was as fair as possible for both sides and I gave you guys a fair critique of what's going on with this story. Thank you guys so much for being here. God bless, and we'll see you all later.